Rough Edges, and I am so excited to introduce my guest, Miss Kelsey. And Kelsey is a licensed professional counselor and supervisor, and she holds a master's degree in both psychology and counseling from Houston Baptist University. Her passion is rooted in trauma work and how attachment styles are impacted. She finds significant value in understanding how we learn to love and how we integrate ourselves into various relationships by exploring childhood unmet needs, lack of praise, emotional neglect, and high achievement expectations. Welcome, Kelsey.
Hello.
Hi. So, I am curious about what you're passionate about. So, what three things are you most passionate about and why?
Okay. I do people come up with like really well, not important but like deep ones, or do people usually do like my dogs, and or do people go deep?
Some people go deep, some people go like my family and, my pets.
Do a
Yeah, so it's a wide
mixture.
range.
Okay. Because I was about to say, I don't know that I'm like have these like deep things, but I off the top of my head, it was like I'm definitely very passionate. I guess that could be the word about my family. It's pretty much just like me, my parents, my brother, and then sister-in-law. And they've been like the solid foundation for years. So definitely passionate and protective over them. I think animals as another one.
Oh,
Like I feel like I'm very passionate about the well-being of animals, especially my two dogs that I have. And then I think I'm also really passionate about books, all kinds of books. Books are definitely one of
mm.
my favorite outlets in general. And I'm also, like my family, very protective over my books. There can be no creases, there can be no bent pages, like passionate and protective. So
Yes, I love that. And what is like your favorite book that you've read?
ever. Hmm. I can't say ever. I'll say recently, one of my friend tried to get me to read it for a very long time, and I just didn't because it's kind of like a little history in it, like World War, and I just was never into that. But The Nightingale and the Women, both by like Kristen Hanna, have been phenomenal reads. The Nightingale made me sob in ways I have
Oh,
not in a very long time. So I would
yeah.
definitely say that book has been my most recent favorite, which they're coming out with a movie and I can't wait to see it.
Okay,
Yeah.
that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I love books as well, and my favorite one, I would have to say, it's a tie between Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston
Hmm.
and The Authenticity Project. Yeah, those are really good ones.
So those are definitely, would you say, more like educational or self-help books, or or am I totally off?
The Authenticity Project is a novel about this artist who had a green journal, and
Hmm.
he wrote his entire life story in it. And so he leaves the journal in places where people could find it and write their stories in it as well. Yeah.
Oh, was it an emotional read?
Not really. I mean, some of the characters, they do a different point of view for each chapter with each character. So
Yeah.
it was some characters had a lot of baggage, but
Hmm.
overall it's pretty lighthearted.
Oh, that's for some reason it like gave me chicken soup for the soul kind of
Oh yeah.
vibes.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you
No,
remember
no.
those books?
Yes, I do.
I
Yeah,
used
no,
to
those
read those
are
so much, but yeah, that sounds like a good read.
yeah, of course. So, oh, we have people coming in. Hi, James Smith. Hello. Guys, feel free to chime in with your questions or anything, and Kelsey and I will be answering them. But, Kelsey, I want to know more about your work as a licensed therapist. Like, how did you get into that? What made you want to do trauma work as well?
Um, Most of my builds up in therapy, like I started at psych hospitals and navigated from there into a residential treatment program in Katy, Texas. And that program was for adolescent girls in CPS custody who had significant trauma history. And so they would stay with us from anywhere 6 months to a year. Um, so that in the psych hospital, I think I was exposed to a lot of trauma and a lot of just like mental health struggles. And so that led me towards really specializing in trauma, and getting like EMDR trained and trauma focused CBT, and then kind of led me into more private practice once the community based mental health kind of tapered off. So now I have my own private practice out in Magnolia, Texas, which I know you're not in Texas. So it's kind of like, what are all these places? But I have my own private practice now after having also been in a group practice. And the focus that I have with a lot of my clients is trauma based, which is where we can explore a lot of childhood core beliefs that have been developed through relationships with parents or even significant people like coaches, teachers, or early on relationships. And so, kind of tying all that into anxiety, identity, depression, self esteem. And then, yeah, the how that shows up in our relationships.
Wow, that's awesome. And I love how your work has just expanded over time because you mentioned that you work in like CBT trauma and
Mhm.
attachment styles. So today we are talking about perfectionism and
Mhm.
how it affects our relationships. So can you like give a little definition as to like what is perfectionism and how does it show up in a person?
Yeah, and so like even thinking about relationships, I think when we're talking about perfectionism a lot, it's even evaluating the relationship with self more than relationship with others. But perfectionism is this standard that we hold ourselves to be error free or to be a high achieving person or to um, look a certain way in society, community based eyes. And what I have found a lot in discussing perfectionism roots is, a lot of especially women will really reflect on the expectations that society has set. And a lot of them can really tie it back to like 2000s diet culture, right? Like all of those movies and TV shows that we grew up on that gave this standard of how a person should be. And so I see it a lot with my, like I said, with my female clients, as you're talking about, like, I have to be this way and I need to be this way and I can't make this mistake and I can't show up like this. And so there's this drive towards being a perfect person, and a lot of times we don't even know who that perfect person is for, because not for us.
Yeah. Yeah, no, most definitely. And the thing about perfectionism is that you're trying to mask a lot of your own insecurities when it comes to looking at other people and their lives. And it's so much of a comparison trap
Mm,
that we find ourselves in, thinking that we have to be this like upper echelon type of person. And we just
yes.
keep missing the value of authenticity. So,
Mhm.
can you tell me, Kelsey, from your perspective as a licensed professional, like how often do you see perfectionism come up? And what is something that you usually say
Oh
to
my
help?
gosh, like every day I see perfectionism come up. And just to be super transparent, I think I it comes up a lot even with me. And so I think when I'm working with clients and you see the perfectionism pop up, I also incorporate a lot of parts work. And so some of the questions that I might ask is like, what is this part needing from you? Like, who is this part showing up for? What are they asking of you? Or even a different question is like, whose voice is this that's demanding this expectation? And so, like I said, a lot of those questions really prompt us to think about, where did I even think that I needed to be performing this way or showing up this way? But it is a question I even have to ask a lot of times in my own personal life, is like, what is driving this desire to compare my life and my values to everyone else's and feel like I'm doing less than.
Yeah, and also like full transparency, I am also a perfectionist,
Yeah.
and it's mostly because I have this fear that if I don't take control of a certain situation, it's going to go out of control
Mm,
like within seconds. So
yeah.
I'm always like, "Oh, I got to make sure I'm extra prepared for this thing because you
Mhm.
never know what could happen." You
Yeah. What and there's this whole, to tie off of that, there's, a lot of times talking with clients about we've confused control with like peace and needing control like that's not actually peaceful. It's this like false sense of peace, so you're chasing in like the idea you're chasing control, you're not chasing peace. But I do hear even that sentiment a lot with my clients is like, well, I show up this way because who else is going to do it. um
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that perfectionism is something that's kind of like well masked, like in front of other people. Like people wouldn't know that you're a perfectionist unless you like really display that behavior in front of them.
Mhm.
So, what are some signs of perfectionism that,
Mhm.
maybe a trusted friend or someone who cares about someone could pick up on to like
Mhm.
kind of help them?
Well, I think it's hard to kind of piggyback off of what you said. I think it's hard because it's also so normalized. Like we have really glorified the grind that a lot of people talk about without also addressing the dark side of this grind and the dark side of high achieving. So when we look at individuals who are overextending, and they're overwhelmed and all these different things, we kind of just see, oh my God, you're so great in your work, or but you have so much money, or you're able to travel and you're able to, like, we glorify these achievements. So seeing perfectionism or seeing people with like high riddled anxiety, um, it's really hard. I think a lot of times you're going to find it when you get into some of these more intimate conversations, like with a friend, where you can just see the, okay, but I have to do this because if I don't do this, then this will be this, or I need to wear this, I need to go shopping for like this new outfit because everyone else is going to be showing up like this. And then I also need to show up like this, right? And you can kind of see it in people's spiral or in their speech and some of the verbiage of like, I should be doing this or I have to do this. And kind of tapping into like, but who's saying that you should, or that you have to, like, where does your opinion and input come in, where does what you want come in? And so I think that's a very like easy, maybe not easy, but that is definitely one way that I would probe someone's train of thought, is when they're using a lot of shoulds and have tos, is it doesn't sound like that's geared for them or geared to what they want. So what do we need?
Yeah. No, that's very important. And I love that you said it's the shoulds and the have tos,
Hmm.
because I definitely fall into that trap where it's like, oh, I should be here by now in my life, or
Hmm.
I should be doing this thing because other people are doing it. And we
Yep.
don't take the time to really rest and actually incorporate some type of peaceful stuff, because
Hmm.
it's very hard to get out of that mindset where you're like, I have to be doing this, otherwise my life is gonna suck.
Yeah.
So, what would you
It's all gonna fall apart.
yeah, like catastrophizing, like
Hmm.
it's all gonna go downhill. But
Yeah.
how would you, as a therapist, how would you help somebody who is showing up with all the shoulds and the have tos?
Hmm. I think, one of the things is with the shoulds and the have tos, my first thing on a processing level with that client is going to be to explore the root underneath the shoulds and the have tos. Why are they there? Again, like, whose voice is that? Who set this expectation for you? And then kind of shift it to like, what would it look like to entertain what feels safe for you? And do we even know what safety within us feels like when we're not
Mm,
trying to achieve everyone else's standard of what a good life is? And a lot of times you can find that there might need to be some stabilization and safety within that person's nervous system of like, if I
mm,
slow down and if I lean into me, I feel a panic, right? I feel like I've done something wrong. Maybe shame is there because I feel like I am bad for not going and working out every day. Like I feel like
mm,
I'm supposed to, you know? And so really getting them a great foundation of how to calm your nervous system when we're challenging the narrative that has been so prevalent for 99% of your life. And I think that that's a really important piece when we're trying to shift people's mentality, is creating that safety within their body first. Otherwise, it won't feel comfortable. So we'll just revert back to what does feel comfortable, which is high achieving, high expectations, trying to be perfect, trying to do all these things. So I think
mm.
that those are, exploring the processing part of it and then also working on safety within their nervous system before we can really navigate into, okay, I want you to take Sunday and I want you to ask yourself the question, what do I want to do today? What feels right for me and where my body is and where my head is, that kind of stuff.
Wow, yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned feeling safe in your own body because that's another thing that we don't really think about in terms of like mental health and trauma and how it does like keep in the body and those
Mhm.
memories are just constantly manifesting themselves if they're
Mhm.
not treated.
Yeah. Yeah. Weirdly enough, came across this thing on Instagram. So everybody can take it with a grain of salt, but it was a doctor that was speaking about it. And he was talking about physical symptoms like people who have cold hands and feet all the time. What we've
Mm.
notoriously like equated that to is people with like low iron or some other medical thing, and he actually talked about it in a sense of your mental health and stress levels and safety within your body. Because if you've never really known safety or you struggle to create safety within, your body spikes all the cortisol for like adrenaline, basically for your flight or fight system. So cortisol navigates all to your heart and lungs to keep these core things alive, meaning that it takes all the blood from your hands and feet.
Mm.
And so he was talking about like a lot of us don't know how to manage stress or deal with a lot of different things in life. And you can see it in people's bodies. So people who have cold hands and feet all the time and their iron levels are great and they eat a lot of meat and all these different things are functioning as usual, you can really look into their stress levels. And people who aren't managing stress well or don't even realize that they're under so much stress, it's because you're body's pumping cortisol all the time. It doesn't know safety. It needs warmth. So I thought that was a pretty interesting, look on it. Cause I mean, you tell anybody that you have cold hands and feet, they're like, oh, Raynaud's disease or low
Yeah.
iron, eat some meat. Yeah. And you're like, whoa, it could also be other things.
Oh wow. Wow, I didn't even realize that. Like,
No.
huh. That's so
Yeah.
interesting.
It's a fun
Wow.
fact. It's a fun fact. I mean, obviously, everybody has to check in physical health wise and make sure everything's functioning great. And then you can explore some of these other avenues. So both are equally important. But I did think it was an interesting twist on, or a different perspective, I'll say that, on what we've always thought cold hands and feet are.
Oh wow. That's and that makes you think about the amount of times we say, "Oh, it's just a headache. Let me just take Tylenol and go to bed." Or like
Hmm.
in my family, we're like Caribbean, so my mom's from Grenada and my dad's from Aruba, and
Hmm.
everything is literally a herb or a bush. They're like, "I'm going to go boil this and you will be fine."
I love it.
But yeah, it just makes you more cognizant of what's going on in your body. Like, is this just a headache or
Mhm.
is it something more than that, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, I there's so many more physical signs to things that are going on, and also something I work on with my clients too is like having that understanding of what your body's doing, cuz sometimes it looks like clenching and grinding your teeth at night, but we just don't really think anything more about that. But that could also be a stress, depression, anything related response from your body. But your body has a lot of signals. We're just not used to paying attention to them. And we also have a society that really encourages the disconnect between body and brain. And so it's very hard for a lot of clients to tap into the messaging from your body.
Yeah, most definitely. And I want to shift over a little bit
Yep.
into the attachment styles because I know that's like a huge buzzword in the
Yeah.
mental health world. And so can you explain a little bit about what attachment styles are and how perfectionism affects that?
Yeah, so we as infants, based on the relationship that we have with our primary caregivers, who when you're a baby, it's going to be typically mom and dad, but it could be a lot of other people too. We develop attachments to them. And this was like a theory created by John Bowlby. And we have four basic attachment styles: you have secure, you have anxious, you have avoidant, and you have fearful. They can be labeled differently. Sometimes anxious shows up as preoccupied. Sometimes fearful shows up as disorganized. So there's a lot of different terms for it, but those are your basic four. And depending on how your primary caregivers show up for you as a baby, it develops your attachment style. The thing is your attachment style can and will shift throughout life. So if you grew up in a household where your needs were inconsistently given and developed an anxious attachment style, it doesn't mean that you can't shift into other things. There's going to be other important relationships throughout our life that also have an impact on that attachment style, but they're typically created in birth through the relationship with our caregivers, and then over time it can either really strengthen or it can change or all that. And then I think the important point, though, too, is a lot of us may display characteristics and tendencies from many of the different attachment styles. I don't know that anybody fits 100% into one of them. So I think that's an important note to make, because what I see a lot of times is people will take assessments and questionnaires and they come away with like, I have a anxious attachment style, and then everything is solely through that lens, and we kind of miss a really other big piece of the picture, and that's okay. We don't all have to fit into something 100%. So have a little fluidity with it. But yeah, it primarily stems from childhood.
Okay. And what does perfectionism like do in terms of like each attachment style, if you will? Like what does it
Yeah.
look like?
Well, so I think perfectionism would probably primarily show up in more of your anxious. I mean, it could show up in a lot of them, but where I notice it most frequently with some of my clients, especially my teen girly pops, is it's with an more anxious attachment style, because that attachment style has a root and a base in I need to earn. And I like, if I can earn this, then they'll stay. And we have such a desire to cling to a specific person. And so then you see people really taking on this approach of like, I need to be whatever that person needs. And I need to be whatever it is that will make them happy in this relationship. And as an anxious attachment style, it could be really easy to lose your sense of identity. And that's because we're trying to achieve and trying to come across as this like perfect significant other. And so I'm sure it has some roots and some play in all of the attachment styles. Where I see it the most, though, I would say, is in an anxious attachment. Probably
Mm.
even in disorganized too, but I'll stick with anxious.
Okay, that's very interesting because we are obsessed as a society with categories, and we're so quick to be like, okay, I'm taking this quiz, like you said, and I'm just like labeling myself with this attachment style. And I think it is important to know like what attachment style you do have and how you relate to others. But sometimes we can get so carried away with all the labels that we just decide like this is me for the rest of my
Mhm.
life and I'm not
Yeah.
gonna change, you know?
100%. Like, I could not echo and agree with what you said more. Like, there is importance in knowing who we are, but there's also caution in fully assigning yourself into this one label. What it can do is it can really pigeonhole us, and then we struggle to see a bigger picture, or we only see ourselves within that scope. And with social media, there's a lot of self-diagnosis happening right now, and again, it's great to be curious, and I love to explore it with clients. There's just caution in fully identifying and saying I am this. Explore it with a therapist, explore it with somebody who can challenge that or give resources for that. But a lot of times what I'm noticing, even in my young adults and teens, is like we just see it. They give a little checklist, put your finger down if you do, and they and they're like, that's me, that's it. And it's like, oh, there's so much more to you and to that concept. Like, let's talk about it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And with the self-diagnosis, it could be harmful, and it also could be you having that introspection to be able to say, hey, I do struggle with this a lot. But we got
Hmm.
to be careful in what we label ourselves because these are not personality traits. Like
Yeah.
they are, well, unless you have a personality
Yeah.
disorder, but that's besides the point.
Yeah. You're like, different conversation.
Yeah, but it's just so interesting in terms of like how we do put ourselves in these boxes. And like you said, there's so much more to ourselves that we don't even realize.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, even like I am an anxious attached girly, but I also am open to the fact that there are parts of me that are fearful and there's also parts that are very secure, you know? And so I do think that if I were to identify only as an anxious person, I would struggle to see the other components that either harmfully contribute to my relationship conflicts or the great parts of me that handle parts of the relationship with ease and trust and vulnerability. And so I think to what we're saying is like that's why it's so important. If I only saw myself through an anxious attachment, I'd be missing improvements over here, and then I'd also be missing a side of the mirror that needs to be seen, and I just am blind to it because I stuck with this one thought.
Yeah. No, and for those of you who are joining, we are doing perfectionism versus authentic love, and we're talking about how perfectionism shows up in different attachment styles and how we relate to others. So, this is what we're talking about. And speaking of authentic love, I do want to get into how like that shows up if we like stop being or just give up a little bit of the perfectionism.
If we give up perfectionism, can we have an authentic love? Is that the
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if we understand our perfectionism, I think if we understand better these parts and pieces of us, we will show up more authentically in relationships and then all areas of our life. The hardest part is when we have some of these tendencies, but we don't really lean into the understanding, and then we just will continue with patterns and we'll continue with oh man, I just lost my word, but we'll just continue with patterns. Like there is a benefit in understanding. Yes, I have a perfectionism desire and roots, understanding why, understanding how to navigate that, and then yes, showing up more authentically. Because like having perfectionism tendencies is also kind of authentic. It is a piece of us. It has been formulated. It has been pushed into our identity. Just learning when we need to kind of put her on the bench for a second and show up over here. So I don't think we have to get rid of perfectionism entirely. I think we have to know how to understand why it's surfacing and understand how to take care of it, understanding if it needs to be benched for a little bit, and then navigating ourselves into relationships, if that makes sense.
Yes, that
Yeah.
was perfect. And also, I love what you said about perfectionism is a part of our society and it's so embedded into
Mhm.
like how we are supposed to live in
Mhm.
society that what you said was important that we don't have to give it up entirely. It's not one or the other. You just got to make sure you know how to manage that perfectionism so that way when it does come up again, you'll be able to show up authentically in your relationships and talk
Mhm.
about it.
Yeah, because like the parts of perfectionism for a lot of us, like they've worked. That's why we have a job that we have, or why we've achieved certain milestones in our life, or all these important things. So to a degree, it's like yay, we love that piece. It's just if it's in overdrive and it's being overworked and it's being overextended, that's not great. And so drawing us back into a balance of knowing when I need to have a little when my perfectionism tendencies are okay, when they're healthy, or when they're really toxic, and understanding that ebb and that flow. But we would ideally love to be in a balanced part because like the high achievement, it isn't a bad thing. It just
Right.
doesn't need to be on 24/7.
Yeah. No, that's definitely it. And so, I'm curious to know what would you say if a client walked into your office and said, "I feel like I'm just like a slave to perfectionism. Like I don't know what to do with my life." You know what I mean? Like that type of thing. What would you say to that client to get them to tap in to more than who they are outside of the perfectionism?
hmm I think that the way you said it is like knowing who they are outside of the perfectionism. One of the questions that I often ask people is like, what would we be if the identifiers weren't so important? And when you ask people to describe themselves, a lot of us describe ourselves in terms of career and job, and I'm a mom and a wife. And there's so much to our identity that's deeper and equally as important. And so a lot of times with a person who comes in there, like, I feel like I can't get away from all of the expectations and I can't get away from what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing and this drive towards being perfect. I think I would explore with them the questions of like, where are we getting these who normalize these expectations for you, and like who are we performing them for? That would probably be some of my first questions in working with them, is just understanding like, where are these coming from, because you didn't just wake up one day and you weren't born with these expectations. They've been embedded in us, so like, let's talk about them.
Yeah, I love that you said the expectations, because
Hmm.
there are so many expectations that we have for ourselves, that society has for us, our families might have for us, and it's just like such a revolving door of like, what should I do with my life, or where can I go? And the path just seems kind of dim, especially when you're doing
Yes.
things for other people, you know?
I mean, talk to anybody who's about to turn 30. They have this moment of, what am I'm supposed to be married with kids. I'm supposed to have like this big retirement setup. I'm supposed to be having a house with a picket fence, and and that is a conversation that I've had personally, and then with a lot of clients, is as they start to get closer to 30, you can just feel it's like a doomsday for them, and it is because we've grown up with these expectations of what you're supposed to have accomplished by 30 and like what you're supposed to be doing at 30. It's a really interesting pivot point for a lot of people, just being like, it's okay at 30 that you don't have your house yet. Like, it's okay. It's okay that you're dating and you're not married, and unlearning some of those pressures and expectations. It is really jarring for a lot of us.
Yeah, girl, you were preaching to me just now, cause like I'm in that same exact boat, and I'm like,
Hmm.
what am I gonna do? And it's like 30 is just, age is just a number.
That's the number. Yeah.
Like, we don't have to be like, okay, this is the 30s, like it's my milestone, this next
Mhm.
decade, and then the 40s, and then the 50s. Like, it's okay. Like, just live for the moment today. Like, why are we
Yes.
looking at years from now, you know?
Yeah. Well, and also, why are we, dismissing all the things that we have done and all of the experiences that we've accumulated and the memories? And it's like, we all of a sudden dismiss that, or it becomes something we're no longer proud of because at this point it should have looked different. And so
Mm,
we no longer appreciate what has happened in our life to get us to this point, because we're already losing, and that's a very hard place to be. I think that's where a lot of that anxiety, potentially depression, identity crisis starts to build in. But yeah, it's okay. It is okay. And what I think is interesting is that you talk to a lot of people who are having kids later in life or marrying later in life. And the question that or the conversation you have with them is very interesting, because a lot of them are like, I don't know that I would have been a good partner earlier on in my life. I don't know that I would
um,
have been the parent that I am earlier on in life, because now we have so many years and wisdom and knowledge underneath our belt, and you've done a lot of the self exploration, hopefully, and the reflections and the understanding your identity. You show up as a partner and a parent differently than you would have in your 20s, and
mhm.
so yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's almost, again, it's just the comparison trap, where you're looking at your life, you're looking at someone else's life, and you're saying, why can't my life be like theirs? Or if my life is not like theirs, then there must be something wrong with me. But to
Yes.
be honest, like, I have friends that are married, and yeah, they're happily married and everything, but I'm like, listen, I love being single. I just love it, because like, more freedom, more, time for doing the things that I need to do, because
Yes.
marriage takes a lot of like, time and energy. Either one of them are not good or bad. But what I'm
Mhm.
saying is, if I continue to look at them and compare myself to them, I'm going to be in a downward spiral myself,
Yes.
you know?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, how do you feel social media contributes to that thought or feeling? Like, do you feel like it has a big impact on sometimes the comparison trap you get into?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Social media is just you could really fall into the rabbit hole of like, oh man, they're living their lives. Like, cuz
Yes.
everybody's on vacation, everybody's posting their marriage, their weddings, everybody's posting about their kids, and it's just like a whole bunch of stuff where you're like, man, Like, what's wrong with me, you know?
What's wrong with 100? I had to. I didn't have to. Sorry, I deleted social media for a good chunk of time, like my personal, because getting on just like flooded me with all of these. For me, it was seeing a bunch of my friends accomplish really cool workout things, and starting my own business and transitioning to a new part of town, and all these things for me took priority. That workouts had to take a back seat. Logically, I can say that now, but in the time it was like, why can't you be like everybody else who has a job and works out and is dating and doing all that, and I was like, what is wrong with you? And it's like nothing, everybody else has their own life. And to be fair, what we do post on social media is always going to be that highlight reel. I don't know what's happening behind the scenes,
Yep.
and so to assume that my way of operating is bad because it's different, come on.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. And it's true. They do post highlight reels. So you're comparing their moments of happiness to your entire life. And
Yeah.
I think that is such a, like, we don't think about it, but it's just like such an unfair comparison. It's like I'm comparing a life that I have, an entire
Mhm.
life, to a snapshot of a moment that somebody experienced.
Yes. And I love that saying that's out there, that's like you're comparing your behind the scenes to somebody's highlight reel, because
Yes.
like when we think about the comparison that we're drawing on for ourselves, it is always the behind the scenes parts that we're not proud of, and yet we're comparing it to somebody else's like highlight. Like we are already at a disadvantage in that comparison.
Yes, no, absolutely. And that's also where the perfectionism comes in, because then you want to take pictures and you take like 50 of them and do all the filters and everything
Oh
to
yeah,
put them
face
on.
tuning, yeah,
Yeah,
everything. All of a sudden, you're breaking the bank to go travel someplace that you probably have no business being at that point, But
true.
isn't that like a line in one of Drake's songs? Like, I'm pretty sure he says that in a line somewhere in one of his songs. But yeah, it happens. It's very easy to get into it. It's also very hard to walk away from.
Yeah. No, most definitely. Well, Kelsey, I want to thank you for coming. But before we go, I have one final question for you.
Okay.
What advice or words of encouragement would you give to someone who's struggling to manage their mental health?
Oh, okay. My first like instinct is like hugs, because it is a hard time to be managing, distress and depression and anything related to mental health. And so, my feedback or words of encouragement are going to be like to find what brings you peace and safety, even on the darkest days. Like if something safe for you feels like a weighted blanket, that's all I would like for you to do for yourself is like go underneath your weighted blanket and give yourself that opportunity. But mental health is something that's really hard to navigate, and a lot of times it's because we don't give ourselves grace to make it through. And so on your hardest days, give yourself that grace. And then obviously, like I would love to see people reach out to therapy or therapists, to turn to navigate some of these things and to have a platform to dedicate it to them, right? Like a dedicated space and time to offload some of your heaviest stuff to somebody who wants to see you get better and walk alongside you. And so you can do this, find your safe places, cure that nervous system as best as you can, and seek out help when you need.
Thank you so much for that, Kelsey. Thank you so much for joining as well.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad we got to do this and everything. So thank you so much.
Yes, and everyone stay tuned for more empowering episodes on Rough Edges.